Have narcissists around the world started collapsing in this worldwide narcissistic collapse that was announced on social media? I'm going to get into that and also discuss what I think is happening and why it's occurring. If you haven't heard of the worldwide narcissistic collapse, it started around summer 2025, and on social media, mainly Instagram and TikTok, but also YouTube as well, people started announcing a worldwide narcissistic collapse. I was like, what? I saw one of them, and then they kept coming in, and they continued throughout the rest of the year. Most of the ones I saw at the beginning were on the spiritual side. Their explanation was basically where the world is headed. And I will certainly explore my take on that. But there's also the regular narcissist abuse coaches who have a more physical and mental explanation. I've thought about this a lot because I've been watching off and on as they pop up for half a year. And the first question I asked myself, is this really happening? Because I did see one person's video in the middle of all this who said it's not happening. The narcissists are just getting smarter and they're not being so obvious. Well, I do think there is some truth to that. I do believe the narcissists are evolving. Some of them, I should say. There are the smart ones that can really adapt to new situations. But there's some dumber narcissists too. Narcissists are clever and shrewd, but they're not intelligent, especially in terms of long-term thinking. So they can, make spur-of-the-moment changes on short notice. But for the long run, I think they're going to have some problems. So there are some smarter ones that I think are getting a little savvy. They realize the old tricks aren't just going to work anymore as well as they did, because too many people are finding out. The word narcissist is used in the mainstream quite a bit now, and it rarely was when I was much younger. Even with these smart ones, though, they still go by the narcissist playbook. And at the end of the day, even though there's some strategies in there that most people would know about, at the end of the day, it's still limited. Narcissists are really confined to how they grew up, what strategies and techniques they were shown as children that worked for them. There's only so much they can do, even though they can be very tricky and the narcissist playbook is vast. It's still finite at the end of the day. So at some point, the majority of people will even figure out the more hidden tactics they have. So that's not even good to work for the smarter ones. But I do think, like I said, that some have evolved and become more secretive about who they really are and what they're really after and all the abuses they're committing, usually behind closed doors. Now that some time has gone by, I would say most narcissists aren't having as good a time as they used to. It is getting much more difficult for them to operate. And I do think there is a worldwide narcissistic collapse. The term is probably a little exaggerated, and I don't think it's just this explosive, immediate domino effect. But something is happening. That I am sure about. Which brings us to, is it the spiritual explanation for what's going on, or the physical/mental explanation? The spiritual people basically argued the frequency of the world is rising, and this lower vibrational behavior that narcissists certainly were engaged in isn't going to work anymore. There's no place for it. It's not going to be able to come along with us. So it's just kind of getting pushed down. Unfortunately, I can't prove this. I don't have some type of frequency or vibration meter that can test the planet and the people in it. But it actually does make some sense. What I have observed is around the past at least few, maybe even 5 years, since 2020, but more noticeably within a year or two after that, and becoming even more noticeable the past year or two, it seems a lot of people are passing away. I know that always happens, but it really feels more so than usual. Like this isn't normal, that type of a feeling. Friends who shared with me about a family member being sick and then passing away would often describe them, and I certainly sympathize with them. Losing most family members aren't easy, even if they were terrors to other family members when they were growing up. I would only share this theory to those that were spiritually advanced. Other times, and most often, I'd keep it to myself. But my insight was the ones that were passing on were usually the ones not really doing much anymore. They weren't growing. They tended to have narcissistic traits without showing any desire for any type of self-improvement whatsoever. And they were just there. They were just existing, not really benefiting anyone, including themselves anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. Please don't confuse what I said with anyone who died in that period of time was a horrible person. No, absolutely not. It's just you could see that their mission here was done. There was really nowhere else for them to go. That's the pattern I noticed. And I'm not saying it's me to judge anyone's life path or anything like that, but it was the common thing that people kept sharing, which is why I came to that conclusion that maybe this really is a spiritual thing going on. There is something to this. It really could be. Like I said, we can't really prove it right now, but if I'm feeling something, and apparently a lot of other people are feeling it, there just might be more going on than we physically can detect. As for the more grounded explanation of what's happening, social media is exposing narcissists. And thank heavens for that, because it certainly is. That there's no denying. For the longest time, narcissists were able to do their dirty work under the radar, and it wasn't discussed nearly as much as it should have been. Recently, and we're talking like the past 6 years, it's become part of the collective dialogue in a major way. There's so many posts about narcissistic traits, narcissistic families, narcissistic workplaces. This is great. This is an amazing thing. It's still such a crazy phenomenon how much it took off in a relatively short amount of time. My guess is people were just so tired of it. But before they knew what it was, there weren't these words to describe what was going on. People didn't know where to look. But once one person started talking about it and another person heard it, it was like, hey, wait a minute, I've experienced that. I thought I was crazy. Wait, it was Narcissists and their flying monkeys? Then they, started spouting off about it. It just caught on and ignited a whole series of events. It's such a crazy time for me personally because I went around half my life not knowing what it was. And then I was entering the second half of my life, hopefully, with this information, a completely different perspective. So yes, I do think there is a worldwide narcissistic collapse because people are sharing this information from so many different places, so many different countries. It's not just where I am, it's all over. This was a problem that was pervasive, and I even saw it firsthand when I went abroad or heard stories that happened to people that grew up abroad or traveled there as well. My opinion on if it was the spiritual or physical world explanation of what's going on, again, this is my personal opinion. I think it's both. Definitely the physical one, because that's easily provable and there's no denying that. But I really do believe that our collective consciousness is evolving. Humanity is raising their frequency, they're raising their vibration, and they're just not putting up with what they used to. And that we're seeing. People like us, the scapegoats, we were forced to protect the abusers, stay silent, and let them do what they wanted. But not many of us are willing to do that anymore. I've experienced it myself. I've seen it in other families, and also even the world political stage. You're not seeing people willing to lie and cover up anymore. That used to be so commonplace in that particular field. Have you noticed this worldwide narcissist collapse? If so, drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Until then, I'm going to keep dropping all the knowledge I have on narcissists and narcissistic abuse. So the next time you encounter one, you'll get missed by the narcissist.